Committee for the 10th of June 2026. I will just open with a karakia. Tu tawa mai runga, tu tawa mai raro, tu tawa mai roto, tu tawa mai waho. Ka tau ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora, ki te katoa, haumie, huie, taikie. Thank you. Welcome everybody. We've got some members of the public with us, so I'll just explain the health and safety and so on. So the meeting is being recorded and will be live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. The health and safety requirements for the Council chamber are shown on the screen. So if you hear the alarm, please leave the site by the nearest fire exit and assemble at the clock tower in Te Maraeohine. Smoking and vaping are prohibited in any council building or entrance. A defibrillator is located outside at the entrance to customer services on the ground floor. And if there are any near misses or incidents, please report to the committee administrator. If you are speaking, please state your name and use the microphone. And press the button on the right-hand side of the console. If the red light comes on, it means the mic is on. I'm not sure if we're expecting councillors online. Have we? We've got no one online at the moment. So we will move to... Oh, sorry, we've got Councillor Kuru online. Welcome, Councillor Kuru. So we'll just go to the apologies first. So we've got apologies from Councillors Lou Finlay and Leonie Harpiter, an apology from Rachel Bowen for early departure, and an apology from William Wood for late arrival. Are there any other apologies? Mayor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, depending on how long the meeting goes, and I'm sure it will be well chaired, I may need to leave for early departure, but that'll be after 2 o'clock, yeah.
Well, we'll put you on for early departure to say you're covered then. Thank you. Okay, so are we adding the Mayor in for early departure? Yeah. So I'm happy to move the apologies, and Councillor Barrett will second, and if there's no comment, we will take a vote. Thank you. And that is carried, 12 votes for and none against. Thank you. I've had no additional items. Has anyone got an additional item that they want to? No. Okay. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Okay, that takes us to public comments. We've got 2 public comments this morning. The first comment is from the Disability Reference Group, and we've got Sarah and Rose here to talk to us, so I think Sarah will be doing the talking. And they're speaking on item 10, the Council Infrastructure Accessibility Initiatives. So there's 3 minutes assigned for a public comment, so when you're ready, we'll hear from you.
Well, kia ora everyone, I'm Sarah Georgeson, and this is Rose Body. And we're coming to talk about the Accessibility Improvement Program that we've been overseeing, I guess, through the reference group, and just wanting to raise some points, I guess, about the progress, or slow progress, I think we need to say, of this program of work. So the Accessibility Improvement Program was commissioned by Council in 2023 to look at the accessibility audit of its building assets, including operational buildings, community facilities, sports pavilions, and other assets there. It didn't include social housing. Initially it was going to, but that was taken out of scope. So the audit has identified around 1,800 action items that need to be addressed, and they were categorised A, B or C. A is sort of the priority ones in terms of they don't meet the building code requirements, and cause, significant sort of difficulty and barriers for disabled people being able to get around and access the various facilities, depending on which one we're talking about. I haven't got it itemised here. We could be here a long time. 1,152 items were categorised as priority A. So they're the ones seen as being the highest accessibility issue priorities. Progress has been limited, as I said, so as of the 10th of June, when we had a meeting with council staff, only 168 items had been completed of the 1,152 in priority A. So, it was acknowledged that progress has been slower than anticipated, and it's been identified to us, the reference groups, that it's primarily because of a lack of dedicated funding. There's currently no dedicated accessibility budget within the long-term plan to address the outstanding issues, actions identified through the audit. The current approach has largely been to incorporate accessibility improvements into other projects where funding already exists. As a result, progress has often depended on the timing and scope of unrelated projects. What the reference group is looking for is that accessibility improvements require a clear funding pathway. The DRG, we acknowledge that council has invested significant resource thus far in this program, including the approximately $100,000 to actually get the audits done. So we've started well, and we appreciate that, and it really needs some, money to actually action it. Accessibility, we feel, needs to be seen as a core requirement. Accessibility should be identified as a core component of council planning and delivery, rather than something that's addressed only when additional funding becomes available. This needs to include incorporating accessibility improvements into long-term plan budgets, including accessibility requirements within project scopes from the outset, ensuring council project teams have clear expectations around accessibility outcomes, and planning accessibility improvements as part of a standard project delivery. So kind of having it, rather than a PS all the time, that it's one of the areas to be focused.
Thank you, Sarah. That is the time. Was there anything, any sort of last closing remark you wanted to make?
No, I think we've probably covered most of it.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comment.
Okay.
And you're welcome to stay to listen to the debate of the item, but it is later on the agenda.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillors will do receiving the public comment after we've received the second public comment. So I'll invite Shane Casey, Dr. Colleen Edwards and Lee Charge on behalf of the Roslyn Community Hub Steering Group to come and talk to item 8, the Roslyn Community Hub update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just saw the sign here, council officers, so I was loath to sit there. Thank you, everyone. Council officers. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Madam Chair, councillors, senior staff, members of the public, thank you for the opportunity just to have a kōrero during public time. My name's Shane Casey. I'm part of the Roslyn Hub Steering Committee. To my right is Lee Chard from the house next door. Apologies from this morning from Dr. Kathleen Fields from the CEO from MASH. I understand she's just come back from leave, so she'll be fairly busy. And of course, Susan Beatty who is our chairperson, who's been herding us to this point. It's really just an opportunity, councillors and senior staff, just to say there is a steering group and we are quietly working away in the background. We have been for a couple of years. Just want to sort of perhaps draw your attention to that Across and Reach, certainly before my time, did a submission to PNCC in the 2024 to 34 long-term plan, and that we also note too and just appreciate the consideration for, I think, year 7 for 1.5 million set aside for this, so thank you. So the steering group, just as a refresher, includes MASH, the House Next Door, Reach and Across. I think probably if I can, in the paper, just draw your attention to 3.3. I think really we've gone through a lot of, 4.2, my apologies. We've gone through a lot of feasibility with Mana Pacifica and the consultation piece for the community. It's clearly drawn a need for services to be in Roslyn. And we're sort of now beginning our process as a steering group, Madam Chair, to drill down to actually what services are going to be required there. So the next feasibility study is work out what we need there. What does the actual site look like? What does the library look like on the proposed site? We're tentatively looking at Skoglund Park, for example. Is it a modular building? Is it something that can be, should needs and circumstances arise, can pieces be removed and other things come in? Does it involve a community garden? The list goes on and on. So that's where we're at, folks. And again, it's just really an opportunity to say thank you, but also just get in front to say, hey, look, we do exist. We are quietly working in the background. And outside of our normal roles, we come together every fortnight to work through a strategy. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, Lee, have you got anything? Other than that, we're all good. Thank you.
Thank you. Since you didn't take up your full time, are you happy to take a couple of questions from elected members?
Chair, if that's fine. Yep.
Okay. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your public comment. Just in regards to mechanisms to raise funds to help contribute to the build, have you set up a separate entity, or are you doing it through one of the lead agencies of your collective?
Okay, essentially, thank you, Councillor. It's a very good question. It's one that needs to be addressed. So currently you've got the members of the steering committee who are driving the project forward. The next step is to set out what sort of steering, formal governance steering group do we want? Is it led by, for example, MASH? Is it led, for example, by Across? Or is one of us from the steering group on a collective community committee that forms a trust? That's the next step, yeah. So we're quite open to options within the community as well. But as I said before, that's one of our next steps moving forward, Councillor.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Shane and team. Getting deja vu here, Shane.
Excellent.
When this idea first came to us in the long-term plan, it was pitched as we needed $1 million to buy a building to put a community centre in. I appreciate the idea's changed now, but you mentioned Skoglund Park. Are you thinking of building something purpose-built, or...?
Yeah, well, along the lines of that, the next step in that consultation with the community is what does a building look like? So, Councillor, I'd love to say that we want to have a wonderful modular system that's eco-friendly and has all the bells and whistles. We just don't know there yet, and it would be remiss for me as a member of the steering committee to go, this is what we're going to do. I'll get told off otherwise, as you can appreciate. But these are one of the many good questions from the community and from the council that needs to be worked through.
Fair enough. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. That's the end of the questions. So thank you, Shane and Lee, for coming in and letting us know that there's a steering group. Awesome. Thank you. So councillors will now just move to receive the public comments. I'm happy to move that. And Councillor Barrett will second. And we'll just vote on that. And that is carried, 13 votes for and none against. Thank you. Now, in your agenda, you'll see on item 6 that we were expecting a presentation from Enable New Zealand, but that has been postponed due to illness. So we will move on to the minutes, confirmation of the minutes for the meeting of the 20th of May 2026. I have one correction. There's a typo on page 11, which I brought to the attention of the administrators, just a reference to a clause that didn't quite carry through. Are there any other corrections? Okay, so we're also going to take the part 2 minutes at the same time. So if anybody did want to raise anything about the part 2 minutes, please indicate that now, because we'll have to move into part 2 to discuss it. Okay, so I'll move that the minutes of the Community Resilience and Sustainability Committee meeting of the 20th of May 2026, Part 1 and Part 2, as amended, that's the typo, be confirmed as a true and correct record. And I'll look for a seconder, Councillor Zabellin. And we will vote, please. And that is carried, 13 votes for, none against, and 1 abstention. Thank you. So that takes us to item 8, which is the Roslyn Community Hub update. And I'll invite Martin Brady, Senior Community Development Advisor, to present. Welcome, Martin.
Tēnā koutou katoa, Madam Chair, Councillors. Martin Brady, Acting Senior Community Development Advisor. As you heard in the public comments during the long-term plan, Reach and Across submitted to Council to consider the need to establish a community hub in Roslyn. As a result, a report was presented to Council in May of last year, which outlined what previous research had been done into the potential of a hub on the eastern side of the city. This memorandum really provides an update on the work that's been carried on with the steering group since May of last year, with the steering group providing the direction and pace at which the project went at. The feasibility study was carried out in which it found that there would be a need in Roslyn for a community-led hub, but it also identified some key areas that still needed work, particularly around governance, operations, location, funding and risk. As you had heard from the steering group, they're going to continue to further this work before coming back to Council, or before a report will come back to Council in the future. Thank you, that is me.
Thank you, Martin. We'll just open up if there's any questions. And there are quite a few, so I'll just ask my question first. In terms of the pace, we've heard from the steering group this morning that they're quite happy with the way things are progressing and that they think that year 7 for the funding is realistic. We had heard from different community groups in Roslyn over a number of annual budget and long-term plan consultations about the sort of pressing needs in Roslyn. How are we thinking to, I guess, address the fact that the funding is still quite a few years away and the project is perhaps needing more input and more time than might have been anticipated? How are we balancing that against what we've repeatedly been told are, urgent needs in Roslyn?
Yeah, well, it's certainly it's the community and particularly the steering group's preference to go at their pace. The next phase is the critical phase, particularly around getting more clarity what it looks like and having it time-bound, so there is more of a stronger framework with a time-bound aspect to it.
So is there anything happening in the meantime to address the social needs, I suppose, that have precipitated the need for this hub?
Well, work still continues. The likes of House Next Door do an amazing job within the suburbs, so there's still things happening. The hub is looking to, from what the report said, was looking to get more social cohesion happening and focused in one particular place.
Okay, I'll pass over to others now. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. Two questions from me. The first one is, when this project came to us, it was a community-led proposal to develop a community hub through the long-term plan. I want to understand why we've now done a feasibility study telling us it should be a community-led program. My understanding is that was the intention the whole way through. So what was the purpose of the feasibility study?
To hear the voice of the community. Up until that point, there hadn't been community engagement to the level that would be required, and to provide direction for the steering group.
Just to clarify, is that not what a consultation would be, not a feasibility study?
Well, part of the feasibility study would be engaging with the community.
Okay. Given councils have already allocated the budget to do this program, why do we need to do a full feasibility study given the decision's already been made to support it in the long-term plan?
The move changed from going from a buyer property, and as the steering group went through the process, they looked at a more broader view.
Okay. The budget of 1.5 million is relatively, modest for a full community centre. It was set at that level because it was done with the intention of buying and upgrading a building. Do we have a view at this stage of whether 1.5 would be enough to build something new, modular, or otherwise?
No, I don't have a view. The next phase, as was alluded to earlier, about getting a clear idea what the hub is, and at that point that could be addressed.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Martin. Just a couple of questions for me. One around budget first. Seems to be a bit of a theme so far this morning. But just 2030, 31 would be year 4 of the next long-term plan, if I've got that right, which kind of still leaves it a little bit in the never-never. Is there an open discussion between our officers and the steering group around any needs that might come into, say, year 2 or 3 of the next long-term plan to make sure that there is a proper runway for that project and it's not kind of a cold start in year 4?
The discussions that's been had is the next couple of meetings that the steering group are having are going to answer the questions around what the time frame they are looking at, so that could come into being at that point.
So in terms of our long-term plan process, there might still be some consideration around kind of what the exact window is then?
Yeah, potentially, yes.
Great, thanks. Just interested, I'd hope that Moana Pacific might be in the room today, but I don't think they're in the room or online. But just through that process of getting this first stage of community input, were there any kind of concerns or themes that were raised? Obviously, there's a lot of proponents of the project, but were we getting any feedback around people concerned by the idea of this going ahead?
Concerns of there being a hub, and no, not at all. In fact, very much in favour of it.
Right across the board?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Just in terms of establishing or identifying the need in the community, was any of the other community facilities assessed in terms of their occupancy or availability for use?
Yes, there was. In particularly related to, I think, the 2022 report about community spaces that Mana Pacifica looked at, and we had also, by that stage, were doing the review of the community centres as well, so that formed part of the view as well.
Okay, so just looking at page 65 at the map with the other community centres and education facilities and churches and social, you know, all of that picture there, the two current community centres, have those been looked at to see what the occupancy or usage is, or the availability of use in those facilities?
You're talking Kelvin Grove and Rangiora?
Well, there's the Rangiora one, and it looks like, from the map, it looks like there's something on Vogel Street, if I'm seeing that correctly, just around the corner from Hayden Street.
That would be house next door, or would it? Certainly I can answer the first part around Rangiora. Rangiora is one of the most occupied community centres that we have in the city. It's well utilised.
And has any expansion at the existing community centres been considered as a part of addressing this need?
No, not at this stage. What I would say is the Skulkland Park option is a preference, but it's certainly not set in concrete, and I think the next phase, as they look at what a modular view would look like, it gives a greater degree of flexibility where a location could exist.
Okay, and the feasibility study, did it highlight anything that we weren't already aware of?
No, it reinforced
Yeah.
what the group thought.
Okay, and what was the budget for the feasibility study?
$20,000.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So just to be clear, Martin, there's only one community centre in Roslyn, isn't there?
Yes,
the
there
Roslyn
is.
Community Centre in Andrew Avenue.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Rangiora Community Centre is
Yeah,
in Roslyn.
yeah. Thank you. Councillor Zabellin.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if you can clarify for me what council's role is in the next step in the phase 2 of the feasibility study.
A support role, providing some guidance and particularly around working with them on the key focuses that have come out of the study around the planning, the financials, etc.
Thank you. And to me, the sort of feasibility study that we've got seems to read a bit more like a needs assessment, and phase 2 seems like it would be more of a feasibility study. Is that something that we're doing in a 2-stage process for efficiency purposes, doing both in the same body of work?
Yeah, the direction that the steering group gave to Mana Pacifica was to do a needs assessment and provide some direction for them to take the work on.
Right. Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a follow-up to the Chair's question about only having one community centre in the area. On page 65, as a part of that feasibility study, it says community centres too, and so I'm just wondering what the second one is referring to.
In terms of the council-owned facilities, we have over in that area would be Milson and Kelvin Grove, which is on Kaimanawa Street. So Milson's on Milson Line.
And how far away is the community leisure centre from?
Oh, some distance. You're talking down by the depot on Ferguson Street.
Sorry, I'll just interrupt here, Councillor, because I can see what the misunderstanding is. So, Martin, on the map on page 65, there's a logo for a community centre on the corner of Hayden and Vogel Street, but that's not a council-owned premise.
That sounds like it's the Scout Hall. or potentially the Samoan church is on that corner.
Okay.
So it's got 6 churches as well, which are yellow sign,
Yep.
and so it's obviously not a church. Yeah, there's 6 churches and there's 2 community centres, and there's if you look at page 65, you can see the map with all the little coloured dots, and each one reflects, and it says 2 community centres. So I was just really wanting to understand what there's obviously Rangiora Ave one, but I just wanted to understand what the second one was referring to.
Yeah, I can't think off the top of my head what it is. It's certainly only one council-owned one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Martin. That's the end of the question, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
I've just been alerted to Councillor Carew online. Sorry, Councillor Carew. Go ahead.
So I think across from Hayden and Vogel is the church. So that's a Samoan church. And there's definitely, from what I know, and I do have a little bit to do with it a lot, there's only Rangiora Ave is our only council-owned building. But on my questions, I've got a few. Have we, because there's a lot of business surrounding the area, have we explored any sort of co-funding options or sponsorship from business?
no, the steering group hasn't at the stage. That will be the next phase.
Fantastic. And the other question I had, and luckily my colleagues have covered quite a few of them. There's quite a high gang population around that sort of Rangiora Ave, Tyne, Tweed, Thames. Did we manage to get any of them in the engagement process?
I'm unaware if they did. So no.
Okay. And also, what was the general makeup of the co-design, when we're looking at the co-design group? So are we in the stage of just gauging interest? I saw some papers in there in the feasibility. Are we just gauging interest at the moment? There isn't actually a co-design group yet.
No, not at that stage. That's the next phase, that the group will be seeking a wider scope of people to contribute to the design.
Okay, and that's my last question. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Martin. That's the end of the questions now. So the recommendation is that the committee receive the memo entitled Roslyn Community Hub Update presented to the Community Resilience and Sustainability Committee on the 10th of June 2026. I'm happy to move that. Look for a seconder, Councillor, Deputy Marshall. So I'm pleased to see this report coming back, and I thought that the work that was done by Mana Pacific was interesting and quite innovative, giving people cameras and doing the photo diaries and so on. And it certainly, I guess, strengthened what we had heard from service providers and what we had kind of been aware of, that there is a pressing need in Roslyn for something of this nature. And I do support the community-led approach. And I think maybe we might be a bit impatient to move a bit more quickly, but perhaps it's better that the steering group works in its own time to bring the community along with them and to make sure that everybody's on board with it. So I'm looking forward to hearing the next stage. I think we might need to remain flexible, as Councillor Barrett has indicated, about how that money that we have got allocated sits across the years of the next long-term plan, whether it all sits in one particular year or it's allocated across to assist work. But I'm certainly optimistic that this will come to a successful conclusion in a few years' time, and it's certainly badly needed in Roslyn, which has sort of been, I guess it's had less attention perhaps than other suburbs with similar levels of need in Palmerston North, so I'm glad to see this working now. We've got a comment online from Councillor Carew.
I'm going to follow on from the comments of Councillor Johnson. I think this project is definitely needed within this community. In terms of the feasibility study, I thought the methodology was excellent. Just the way that they engaged with the community was really well done. And also knowing that there's a large refugee community as well, it seemed like they got a lot of those people. I am just really excited to see some other areas explored as well. Maybe the Rangiora Ave, Vogel Street, there's a plot of land over there somewhere. And just really excited to see where this goes, and hugely in support of it. Thank you.
Thank you. The Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Marty and the team, for the report. I too was quite interested in the feasibility study, but I actually think it's more of a needs assessment too when you read through some of its contents. And I go to page 4 of its document, page 31, where it says, Roslyn is a community that could benefit from improved support, activity, accessibility and connectivity that a hub or a community hub would embody. And if you go back and understand, Roslyn's been forgotten about a little bit, and you think about all of our suburbs, you know, it was in the history of how it came about, the family farm, the Ross family farm, and the government took it over in the 40s, and it has had limited investment over time. It's been, since I've been here, it's been brought forward to us under different guises. It's been Rosalind Reach have pushed it. Former councillor Susan Beattie was very strong on it. Councillor Wood's right, it sort of deviated to a building opportunity that was available, but you know, we've since found that that wasn't really suitable, and that's where the budget line came in. But I think the need is definitely there, and if you think about the city's eastern side, Rosslyn Library is in there. We've got a number of educational facilities. We've got pools. We've got Scoglan Park, and think about, you know, existing facilities, existing car parks, infrastructure. It does make sense where we've got the Highbury Library, for instance. It's got, you know, it's got car parking facilities and space around it. This could be quite similar, but in this space, not only the library, but we could have other community groups, NGOs, Rosslyn Reach, Across, House Next Door, MASH. But I do think there needs to be a group that has a hierarchy and incorporated society that champions it. Because at the moment we're getting everyone coming at us. So that would sort the governance, and it could champion the project. Because I do think it is a bit of a joint venture here. You know, you could imagine community gardens. You know, we'd be responsible for the library and perhaps some sort of council services there. But you know, these other groups could have a place there, and we've seen it happen in other cities. Christchurch, Rotorua, Hamilton have different examples where it's all joint venture. There's external money, but we should build off what we've got already. And I think the site selection of potentially Scogland is quite a good fit. So well done. Look forward to the next stage and where that comes into long-term plans. Thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Yeah, I totally understand the aspirations of this community, and I think it's really good that there is some community-led initiative happening here. The feasibility study information was really interesting. I did question how much new information it actually gave us that we're not already aware of. But what I did find interesting, particularly in the survey question outcomes, was the 3 best things that people have identified about Roslyn. The 6th is community halls and the 7th is community programs. And it did remind me to consider what we do already have on offer there. And across the community, I think what we have to offer is not just about what council owns, but what is available in the community. And in the meantime, until such time as something new is established, I think it's really important to identify what use is available already. And I mean, even the leisure centre is only 650 metres from that area, and we have a good bus service. So I do think it's great to have this the interest for something new, but I also think we need to identify what already exists, and there's a wealth across that map that's included there. There's a wealth of opportunities for people to be able to gather in other facilities in the meantime.
Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Madam Chair. It's been a really good combination this morning, actually, having the public comment as well as the officers' report. Really great to have a couple of the lead members of the informal at this stage steering group, but to have their perspective as well as to hear the officers' update. Really good to hear that there is a flexible and quite open engagement going forward in terms of how to do this. Also really pleased that it has moved on from the kind of buy now quick kind of model. We've actually had a few different community groups over the recent times come in with a hot real estate deal. And I'm just glad that we're not kind of in that space. I don't think it's really that appropriate for council to be working in that way, and I think this is a much more strategic track that we're on now. Really like the fresh approach that Mono Pacific brought to this. Some others have commented on that, but really appreciated having some of the Australian experience and perspective in there, so I thought it was a really good guiding document for the next stage here. And yeah, I think, you know, Councillor Naylor is quite right in terms of existing resources and making sure that we're aware of them. I think we need to, you know, see some information that's not just the dot on the map, but actually how available that dot is and what other obligations might sit within that dot, rather than rushing to assumptions that those dots are suddenly ours. But if there is genuine capacity in the community, yeah, let's be aware of that and make use bridging that in the meantime. Thank you.
Councillor Zabala.
Thank you. It's been really interesting to see this project evolve from, like Councillor Barrett said, sort of seeking financial help to buy a building for a hub for community services to operate out of, and see it evolve into this, what's suggested from this feasibility study / needs assessment, which has a lot of elements that are still to be decided about how it would operate. So it does seem like a much bigger undertaking than just purchasing a building for services to co-locate in, because there's talk of staffing it now and how it would be governed, what those arrangements would be. It would be a custom build, and it's quite a different proposal, but I do think that that's a reflection of having a better understanding of the scale and the nature of the need that has been established through this study. And I just wanted to differentiate as well between what is a community-led hub for services is not the same as a community centre that's council-run, because a community centre is a venue for hire that's available. A community hub that's such as that what's proposed here is not that. I think they're performing really different functions and they're doing different things. And this proposal has arisen out of an identified gap in that space. So I don't think we can really conflate and go a community centre offers space. A community hub is offering services in a way that's more accessible, so they're not the same thing. Thanks.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm nodding along with Councillor Zabala, and that was very much my line of thinking. I think I just wanted to comment, say I really valued the reporting that's come through in this. It's been a very iterative process, as others have referred to, and I think actually that's the strength of it, that the project itself is leaning into the community feedback. Yeah, for me, this speaks to the changing aspirations of community over time. There's a lot of comment in there. It's really rich in the comment from community about their aspirations for the place that they identify as their community, which, you know, for me, there's the map with the expanding circles, I suppose, of what is the community of Roslin. And I think when you read the community comment, it's actually quite a tight geographical location. And taking that alongside the maps of all of the community facilities, I think really emphasised for me that how communities choose to participate in community life is shifting over time. People want shared services that draw, that have multiple points of connection rather than single facilities that you go to for that thing. And I think that's something that will probably inform other projects as we go through, parallels for me with the work we've done with the multicultural community in bringing their centre into the CBD. So thank you for the work that's gone on. I really look forward to seeing where this one takes us.
Thank you. Thank you all for your comments. I agree with Councillor Zabellin. I do think we need to be careful that we just don't conflate anything that's got the word community in front of it as being the same thing. And also, the Rangiora Community Centre is extremely well-used space. And I feel that if we had an excess of community centre space that could just be repurposed into this kind of hub, we'd have done it already. The whole point that we've got pressure to think about how we can better co-locate library, social services, and provide what would effectively be a sort of a public gathering space where people can meet others, attend programs, access services, and it becomes a kind of community space. That just isn't really available in Roslyn in the same way. There's a tiny little space in the library, but that's it. And even the library building, we don't own, it's a lease. So I do think we need to be careful that we're not just saying, oh, well, we've got a community centre there and someone else has got a hall, so they've got enough space. We've done a very detailed assessment of community spaces across the city, and that report's available. Space is at a premium, the city is growing, needs are changing, and I think we need to be open to how people want to access the services. So my thanks to the steering group, and please keep up the good work and keep us informed of how you're going, and you know, we hope for a really good result here for the people of Roslyn. Thank you. Okay, let's take the vote. That is carried, 14 votes for and none against. Okay, we are now on item 9, which is the Community Centres Improvement Plan update. So I'll invite Amy Viles, Manager of Community Development, and Martin Brady, who's getting a bit of a workout in the chamber this morning, to come back and present the next paper. Thank you.
Yeah, this is my first time back to back. So, tēnā koutou, Madam Chair, Councillors. Alongside me is Amy Viles, Acting Manager, Community Development. This memorandum provides an update on work that has been done since we last presented to Council in May of last year for the Community Centres Delivery Model Review. We'd just like to acknowledge the volunteers that come out of the various community centres that sit on the working group for their input, time and commitment over the past, since August of last year. This work goes some way to support the place-based activities in both the eastern and western neighbourhoods across the city. The working group has focused on the 8 focus areas to improve consistency, access, functionality and the overall user experience for community centres. We're pleased to say that good progress has been made by the working group, with the next phases being progressing the shared booking system, developing a shared marketing plan and finalising the new agreements with the community committees. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Martin. A question for me just to start with. On page 86 in the table there, there's a comment around under sustainability and challenging to build sustainable management committees with a strong volunteer base. There's a comment around there about some committees using contractors to help cover key roles. So, and I had noticed one community centre in particular advertising for a paid role. So have we got committees, community centre committees now employing people to do work?
That's a mechanism by which they do so. Part of a portion of the revenue that is generated from hiring the facility is meant to be spent on the day-to-day running costs of community centres. So Normally, for a couple of the centres, it's a contract for hire. The committees are legal entities, and so they enter that relationship. What I would say is it's broader than just simply a booking officer or one particular role. Some of the busier centres and the bigger centres require a lot of time and effort, and it's one means to get that work done.
That was a surprise to me, I must say, because my understanding had been that we deliberately used this model of volunteer committees, and therefore the proceedings from the hire of the hall could then be funneled back into improvements in the hall. I was surprised that the model had changed to allow proceedings from the hire of the hall to be spent on employing people to either run the bookings or do the cleaning or whatever it is that they're employing people to do.
It's usually in cases where the centres are so heavily utilised and they can't recruit anybody on a voluntary basis. They just, some roles, some positions are, most of them are voluntary or an honorarium. But some of those, particularly the booking officer type roles, are very busy roles, and they've struggled to fill them. So it's a small amount that they get paid, but that's the only way they've been able to keep the centres running.
So, I mean, I know we have looked at the model of how we run the community centres, but would it not be more efficient for council to employ one booking officer to do all of the bookings than for individual volunteer committees to be trying to contract out to pay booking officers themselves?
So we had looked at that and we discussed it with the working group because that seemed quite an obvious solution. Yeah. But the feedback from the committees was that would take away their core function, like what would be their purpose in being a management committee of the community centre if they were no longer had the discretion to take the bookings.
Okay. I might have more questions, but I'll pass over to others. Councillor Zabellin.
Thanks, Madam Chair. My questions are all along the same lines, so some have already been asked. I wanted to touch on, you've made a point that council officers will provide additional support to the management committees identified as facing heightened sustainability hurdles. Just wondered, what kind of support? Is that a case-by-case kind of ad hoc support, or are we doing a sort of more systemic look at those challenges?
The answer's both, I guess. Yeah, over time, a more systemic look as place-based community-led development moves. A lot of the feedback was it's gone from a neighbourhood focus to a citywide focus. The bookings in the spaces come from across the city. We've supported with things like connecting community centres with Volunteer Central to help recruit. A lot of our committees are mostly retired user groups, retired people, so they've identified themselves that the succession is it's going to be a challenge going forward. So we continue to support them in that space. Different types of approaches. The Leisure Centre have as part of their constitution that the founding members of their centre need to appoint a person into their committee, so that helps with having a broad base and a strong committee. So yeah, a wide variety of approaches.
Okay, thank you. My other question was, I think Councillor Johnson's covered them, but I guess my core question is it a reality that or a looming reality that our system of being over-reliant on voluntary committees is not perhaps realistic going forward?
So look, honestly, it's a view we considered 12 months ago when we went into the review, but what we found was strong committees overall with very dedicated members who commit a lot of time week to week and are very committed to the success of the centres. So we did go into that review 12 months ago with that as a possibility, but what we found is overall the model is working well. It's not to say in another 5 years that might be different, but we've worked closely, which is why we set up a working group, which is why we had representatives of each of the community centres, because they are so committed into the outcomes, and we wanted them to be a part of that journey.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Councillor Carew online.
Moving to digital access, are we still going to have a traditional booking system as well for people that don't have access to the internet?
So one of the challenges with the booking system, ideally we would have gone with the booking system first, which is what we'd identified when we saw you 12 months ago. It was the priority for us. However, since that time, our venues and events team have moved to a new booking system, and the most consistent approach was to wait for them to do their rollout and make sure that their system would match with what our needs were, and that's the case. So the intention is to make bookings consistent and much easier for users. So I don't know if you know at the moment, but at the moment you have to go online. You need to go into each different booking system for each different community centre, contact that booking officer. So what we're looking for is a consistent approach where I can go online, see a centre, and then find which ones are available. You'll still be able to contact, in answer to your question, you'll still be able to contact via phone the booking officer. So there will be that option to not have to book online.
Will there also be the itemisation of things that you can access, like some, say the youth space, you can book the mics and the all of the equipment. Will that be on there as well?
So you will have seen over the last 12 months through elected members updates, we've sent you through as we've completed video walkthroughs of each of the community centres. So kind of like a real estate agent ad. There's someone welcoming you in and showing you all of the facilities. And alongside that, we've updated the website. So there's a page for each community centre which outlines the amenities. And also as part of that, we've worked with community centres to increase things like technology so that we've got this consistent approach. Keyless entry is another thing.
Okay, fantastic. Do you feel the fees are becoming a barrier for low income groups, or will they?
No, we feel like the fees for booking community centres are very reasonable. However, one thing we had identified is that the fees structure varied quite significantly between centres. So we've been working with community centre committees to build some consistency again. Some were charging a very low amount and some more reasonable amounts. So we're levelling out, supporting committees to level out the booking fees, and committees have some discretion as well that they're still able to utilise. So if they wanted to give discounts for purpose groups, they're able to do that.
Fantastic, thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Also looking at page 86 at the sustainability area, the honorarium that's paid to volunteers, is there any consistency, or is there any advice that officers give the committees about what that should look like, and is there any consistency, or is it up to each committee to determine what that looks like?
It's up to each committee to decide. That said, the honorarium that are paid are the smaller centres, and we provide advice on what that should look like.
Okay, and in terms of going back a page onto page 85, the resourcing allocation, I think there were some comments about this in the paper last year as well. The framework for a return of revenue to council, can you explain that a little bit? Does that contribute towards some of the maintenance and renewal costs, or how is that return structured? And also, I think a year ago, part of the reason for that being looked at was there was some quite high reserves. I'm just interested to understand how that is being addressed.
So we're still working through that. Yeah, those things are true. Some community centres generate a reasonable amount of revenue, and others, because their fee structure has been so low for so long, their revenue collection is lower. So kind of a dual purpose of creating some consistency in fees so that we've got some balance in revenue as well. And the plan is to have that balance. So Marty was saying earlier, making sure that centres have enough operational costs in reserve, that there's enough for the day-to-day functioning of the centres, also creating that ability to be able to give back to community, but we're also working with our property team and our legal team on new management and lease agreements to look at, so we've done a look at each community centre, how much they pay for their rent under the support and funding policy, who pays for power, how much cleaning costs and insurance and all kinds of things. So that's a work in progress. But that's definitely the intention.
So how much of that revenue is being returned to council to cover some of those costs? Is there a framework that determines, like, where would we find how much is coming from the revenue versus how much is rates funded, I guess is what I'm interested in. And is that covered in the revenue, finance and revenue policy, or?
So we're still finalising that now, but we can make that available.
Okay, so will there be a further report come, or how would we find that information out?
Yeah, through the elected members update, if that seemed reasonable.
Okay, lovely, thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Martin and Amy. Just a question left on my list around the around the hiring side of things. And if I've read the report right, it looks like there's, at least for some of the centres, a kind of commercial level coming in as well as a community level. Is that the situation?
Yeah, that's correct. Again, we were looking alongside the working group to have consistency. There may be some centres that will never have a commercial entity in there, but some do, and predominantly around organisations that they need a centre to train their staff in, so that they have opportunities to use that space. The community centres, and we feel that there needs to be a distinction between community groups and those groups that are using the facility for their work, albeit in a training sense.
Just further from that, we're always working with community centre committees to ensure that they're meeting the intended outcomes of community centres, which is to provide a bookable space for community. So the priority is not for business use, it's for community use.
Great, thanks. You must have been reading my mind. Are there cases where there is kind of any tension there in terms of conflicting bookings or committees that want to go down a path of, raising money through being a commercial kind of orient rather than a community orient?
Yeah, so we work very closely with our community centre committees and are available for helping them to support them to make decisions. Mostly we leave the bookings to their discretion. However, in the new lease agreements, we will be having a clause around if there are any controversial bookings, because we know that that's something that's come up in the past. So yeah, support, but at their discretion is mostly, we trust them to make those decisions, and I think that serves us well. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Madam Chair.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the report. Over the years, there's been some pretty contentious speaking engagements in facilities in the city. Do you think that's a good example of why bookings should be dealt with this building, one person sort of thing? The last speaking engagement, a ratepayer was dragged out of a meeting by a hair.
So I think I answered in the previous councillor's question. We think that the current system that we have is working well, but we will be including a clause in the next agreements relating to those issues, because it has, from time to time, it has come up in the past.
Could be safer. Thank you.
Councillor Mickelard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, team, for the report. Just want to touch on one question that I have, which is on 5.2. I understand that last year when this a similar report came through, there were a number of key actions or key points that led to this report coming back into the council. And I understand that you mentioned as part of your next steps that officers will report back to council, both in the elected members update or the overall on the overall utilization of community centres. My question is, how much work will it require if we're to consolidate these updates into, let's say, a biannual or an annual report that comes to council through formal channels such as this, as opposed to an informal update to councillors?
Yeah, we could do that if that was your request.
Okay, that has brought us to the end of the questions. Thank you, Amy and Martin. Councillor Mickelard, you're in the queue. Is that for a comment? Yeah, okay. I'm happy to move that we receive the memorandum entitled Community Centres Improvement Plan Update, presented to the Community Resilience and Sustainability Committee on the 10th of June 2026, and look for a seconder. Councillor Barrett. Thank you for this update. I found it really useful and informative, actually. It was very helpful. I'm particularly pleased to see that you've got a kind of a get-together of the committees to discuss things and to make sure we've got consistency across all the community centres. I think that's a big advantage from a user experience perspective. And also, I think the upgrading to include Wi-Fi, solar panels, keyless entry, and so that the community centres can double up as places of refuge in civil defence emergency is a very foresighted thing as well. So commend the work. Clearly it's a work in progress, and as you can see, there's lots of interest around the table in it. So we look forward to the next update. Councillor Mickelard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the reason why, I'll support that we could receive the report that we just received from staff. The reason why I'm also going to add in probably a recommendation, an amendment to this, is to simply ask that the Chief Executive provide a report either on an annual basis or biannual basis. And the reason why I want this to happen is simply because exactly around this year, last year, we received a similar report. And the reason why we actually have this report today is simply because we wanted to keep track of all the key progress updates that have been highlighted in this report. There's about 7 or 8 key updates that staff have actually highlighted in the report, in my opinion, that I feel like we need to keep track of. The second reason why I also wanted to add this amendment or recommendation was simply around the functionality of the community halls that we have. We have many people who have expressed dissatisfaction around community halls not being fit for purpose, and they've also expressed dissatisfaction with the technology around Wi-Fi or internet performance, microphones missing or not having microphones, or the lack of projectors as well to project PowerPoint slides if they had, let's say, a speaker coming in to present to them, and also smart TVs. So the reason why I wanted to add this recommendation was simply because I think that we need to keep track of all the key points or point of actions that officers have highlighted in the report. And I simply think that receiving it as part of an elected member's update is an informal way of doing that, and bring it back into the chamber would, formalize the process and we allow everyone, including the community, to have an eye on it. And this is seconded by Councillor Naylor.
Is that an additional recommendation then, Councillor McLeod? Okay, I'll just ask for the General Manager to comment on that.
Kia ora koutou, Danelle Whakatahi, General Manager, Customer and Community. I think our preference, if we wanted a report, would be a biannual report, just given the workload of the team. Another option to consider would be a stronger narrative in our non-financial quarterly reporting around that particular subject, so it's not as informal as in the elected member update.
So have you put your recommendation through, Councillor McLeod?
Thank you.
If you just bear with us, we'll wait a minute until Councillor McLeod's recommendation is on the screen. Okay, while that's been typed up, I'll allow others to make comment, and then if you did want to come back in the queue and make a comment on Councillor McLeod's recommendation, that will be fine too. The Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to congratulate the staff for bringing this report forward and acknowledge the fact that I think those key areas of improvement provide a good framework for assessing progress. I also, in particular, am quite excited, as the Chair had mentioned, to see about the IT progress and the opportunities to integrate IT into those centres, and how you've been working really closely with the 9 centre committees. I know that those centres work really hard with people going in. I was saddened a bit to read about the functionality, and sometimes some users express dissatisfaction with the cleanliness of the areas. But I do think that comes down to the people who have used it, and you've got some people who use it really, really well, and they leave it in a better state than what they find it. Let's hope that's the majority. And those that don't, well, they need to be given fair warning. I like the notion of the bond requirements. Should those who leave it clean and in a good state, they won't have to give up their bond at all, but others who might not, well, we'd probably think twice about letting them use it without some sort of consequence should they do that again. But I really think there's a lot of good information in here, and I'm really, really grateful. And the community centres do provide a fantastic space and facility, and as I mentioned before, it's about other people respecting that space and how they use it, and including equipment and so forth. And I've certainly been in places where they have, I think of the Highbury Whānau Centre, where they're really well organised and they have things at hand when you need it, and I'm grateful to those people who do look after what's on offer, but we're also moving ahead. So thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Zabellan.
Thank you. I'll just repeat all the good things that have been said, but I also just think it's really great to see the improvements that are being made to improve the offering of the centres and to make it more consistent. And it's been really interesting to see this citywide usership trend increasing rather than a highly localised usership. I think that it sounds like the volunteers are highly invested and motivated to keep the current model, but at the same time it's becoming evident that the demand and the workload has increased and perhaps beyond the capacity of some committees in some cases. But I take the officer's advice that there is still a high level of commitment and dedication and no waning appetite among the volunteers to keep going. But I just wouldn't want to see us burning those people out or making the position unattractive to new volunteers and thereby making that system more unsustainable. So I'm really glad that our officers are aware of that and are actively working on that problem. Just in relation to the additional recommendation, I am satisfied with the GM's suggestion that a regular narrative reporting through the existing quarterly performance report, it seems reasonable. It's a couple of sentences and I'd prefer that to a whole report, so I'm happy to support that. And just a quick note that the distressing event that was referred to by our colleague earlier did not take place in a council community centre, but rather a venue that was under a private lease. Thanks.
Mayor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, thanks to the officers for the report, and just want to acknowledge actually the volunteers that run the community centres. They're the real people that need to be thanked, and I see John's in here. Welcome, John. So from Kelvin Grove, but I mean they love doing it too. They do it for, there's a bit of passion involved in all of that. They serve a real purpose, and you can see the localised areas which they look after, and there's a bit of, I suppose, tradition in what's happened in a certain suburb. And you know, where the city can help, I think is good. As Councillor Zabellan said, there has been some, I suppose you call it sustainability and committees being getting new people involved. I speak at a lot of these places, and it does vary, but that's localism. That really is localism. So there is not the there's sometimes smart TVs in some, and there's screens in others. Some people know how to work it all. Some people don't. But look, that's okay. You sort of get to understand where things are going, and it has improved over the last decade, definitely. There been a couple of questions. I'm not sure where that was leading, but we've got 3 examples where these community committees have made funds and reinvested them back into the facilities. So the community leisure centre, you think of the commercial grade kitchen there. A lot of the money that was paid back into that. That was the old telecom stores depot years and years ago, and rather than demolish it, the city took it over, and then it's been a group that has really done all the work to refurbish that and get it in place, and there's been many decades there. Kelvin Grove Community Centre, for years they complained about the parking because there was none. And so to get the city underway, they challenged the city and put some money into the car park and other facility upgrades that they've done. Highbury Whānau Centre is another one, and we all went on an induction tour and we saw what they've done there, certainly around the furniture for that facility. So there's 3 which would have come out of rates normally. So I don't think we should be making money out of them, but we certainly should be asking for them to help where they can, and I think they sort of are doing that. So I'm comfortable with the regular updates. I think that's wise, that we just keep a bit of an eye on things. Sometimes they just meander along and we only hear about it when an issue comes to play. But I'm happy to support both these. And again, thank you to the volunteers.
Thank you all for your comments, and I think it sums up we're all appreciative of the model involving community and the kind of individual aspect that it gives to each community centre, which is adds a bit of character to each one. And it's good that councillors are remaining engaged with the committees, I think, so that they do feel supported and so that we get consistency across the group. And I'm very happy to support Councillor Michelad's suggestion of future further regular updates through the quarterly report. Did anybody want us to separate 1 and 2? Right, is everybody happy? It's not controversial. Good. Right, well, we will take 1 and 2 together then. Councillor Mickler, did you need a right of reply on your additional recommendation? Oh, okay. That was a rhetorical question, but okay. He does want a right to reply, people. Okay.
Yeah, because when I was talking about the biannual is because last year when it was discussed on May 15th, some councils might not have been here, and when I mentioned the biannual, I've seen some faces, some councils making faces because staff had said that they can only do it on a biannual basis, and the reason why I suggested biannual was because of that. But it's good to see what our GM say today. I mean, as the further improvement that GM has referred to. I said today around a regular quarterly update. So I just want to clarify because I've seen some faces go, councils making some faces when I say biannual or annual reporting. It was simply because of what staff had mentioned last year that they can only do it on a biannual basis. Thank you.
Right, so let us vote on 1 and 2 together then, please. And that is carried, 14 votes for and none against. I'm in your hands, councillors. Would you like a morning tea break at this point? Okay, I'm seeing nods. So let's take a morning tea break now for 15 minutes and we'll be back in here at 22:11. Thank you. Kia ora koutou. We will resume the Community Resilience and Sustainability Committee. So I'll just invite elected members to take their seats at the table. Thank you. So our next item is item 10 on page 93. And that is the Council Infrastructure Accessibility Initiatives. And we have Glenn Bunny and Tyler Silver and Kathy Dever-Todd to present. Kia ora koutou. Just all make sure your microphones are on when you're speaking. Over to you.
Thank you, councillors, for the opportunity to present this annual report. We will take the report as read. We were here to listen to the comments from the public earlier, so happy to answer any questions on the report or that earlier public comment.
Thanks very much, Kathy. I'll open up for questions. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, and thanks for the report. Just really wanting to follow up on some of the comments made in the public comment this morning. Particularly, the comment was made that there was no budget in the LTP. I'm just wondering if you could clarify that, whether that's in fact the case or not.
Certainly I'll speak to that, and then I'll ask Tyler to follow on. Within parks, we have that program that is targeted accessibility and safety, and that's about 30k. Within the other areas, there are no targeted accessibility programs. The reason for that is it makes the most sense to incorporate those initiatives within existing programs and the funding. We are better to consider accessibility alongside the other issues we may find at a site, levels of service, capacity, safety, and incorporate that into one project. And so there will be funding for accessibility elements within other projects existing, but the speaker was correct. There is no, except for that parks program, no dedicated accessibility program singly by itself, and that is quite deliberate, and I'll ask Tyler to explain that.
Yeah, so within transport, our intention would be to take a similar approach in that we would leverage off existing programs to achieve the actions identified in the accessibility audit. It makes sense where we have funding categories with NZTA. We can receive funding against these categories. We can use that to achieve accessibility outcomes. We can leverage off existing work, existing traffic management, project management, all of these things to have dual outcomes. A good example for that would be something like footpath renewal. We have a footpath renewal program. We can use that to achieve accessibility outcomes in an intentional way, led by the audit and with input from the reference group.
Okay, thank you. Just to continue to gain some clarity on this, during the LTP process, the Disability Reference Group made a submission, and I followed up specifically with the Chief Executive to get assurance that the outcome of that audit, the work was included in the LTP, and I was given that assurance in a similar way to what you've explained today, that it's included as a part of programs within maintenance and renewals. Is there an issue of the way that this has been communicated that may be misunderstood? If someone's then saying there's no budget in the LTP, would you suggest that perhaps that's not entirely correct?
Having listened to the presentation, there was talk about no dedicated program in the LTP, and the presenter also mentioned that it is incorporated into existing programs. So my understanding was from Sarah's presentation, she did understand that distinction.
Okay, I'll leave it there, thank you.
Thank you. Couple of questions from me. I suppose one is that the comment was made this morning, public comment, that the pace of change has been slower than anticipated. Would you agree with that statement, first of all? And then I suppose, how long is it going to take even to address just the priority A actions at the current rate of progress?
So just speaking to the pace of change around the audit, that has taken longer, obviously with transport. That took a while to define the scope, work with the Disability Reference Group on what that would be, and an audit process of the extent that has been allowed for here at Council is not a quick process. So in terms of that pace, that's certainly been slower. In the building space, you'll be aware with property that they're incorporating that into their renewals program. The budgets have been reduced in previous years and constrained, and so they're incorporating it in, but there hasn't been additional funding for that. I don't know if the other two want to make any further comments.
Yes, specifically around how long are we predicting it's going to take to get through the list at the current rate of progress?
Glenn Bunny, Manager, Property PMO. Hard to give you a time frame, Madam Chair. With the property actions or property-related actions, my two colleagues are right, we pick them up through the renewal and other programs. I think the statement or the suggestion that without a dedicated funding program specifically for this, you could say that the timeline is slower than if it did have that funding. So in the property space, we do, similar to my colleagues, approach the accessibility improvement initiatives as part of other works. Where there aren't other works listed in a particular year, but there are outstanding accessibility initiatives or things to address, those things obviously don't have that carriage of a project or a program to be able to address them. So we do what we can as intelligently as we can with the programs we've got, but without that dedicated program, it is opportunistic, depending on what we've got on any particular delivery program.
Yeah, I understand that. Are you familiar with the model of the low carbon fund that we've used to allow, capital developments to incorporate a sustainability lens to reduce carbon? And if so, would that kind of fund directed to accessibility improvements be helpful?
Any additional funding for these activities would accelerate the rate in which we could work on that list of outstanding actions.
Okay. In terms of the long-term plan then, where we're thinking of setting budgets going forward, would you be able to provide us with some information that would help us think about what budget line we might determine for that?
That's something we can probably come back to on. The difficulty with accessibility is carbon fund is a little bit easier to define, and we're saying we could do this, and if we did that, we would reduce our carbon. I think accessibility is a spectrum, and there's lots of different accessibility issues for people, and so therefore we would have to look, I think, primarily and say, if we were to put together a program, what would it look like, what would the scope be? So if we can take that away and give that consideration as part of developing the long-term plan and look at what that program would look like, and we can come back to you with advice on that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Zabellin.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just similarly, I wondered, now that we've adopted the annual budget, is there a way we can kind of forecast the progress we might make in the next financial year, given that those programs are now set?
Yes, we can take a look at the audit actions and yeah, we can run those across the plan program for the year, and we could predict that.
Yeah. Is that something that we could be able to take a look at? Just like noting from the report, and up to May 2025, we'd completed or addressed like 200 items, and then in the last financial year there's been 47. So in terms of trying to establish a baseline as to how much we get done through this incorporating or integrating, could that information come back to us somehow, maybe through the update, just as a sort of flag to help us contextualise how much we can reasonably expect?
The short answer to that is yes. The difficulty with that is, in some cases, we have picked off the low-hanging fruit.
Sure.
And so that number could be less if a project, just because of the scale of the project and the number of items within it. So, for example, if we're working through something like the Central Library to address all the accessibility issues there, would mean there would be no money on any other facilities in the city in that year. So I think, yes, we could, but I don't know how useful the numerical would be.
Sure, yeah, I understand. Could we use that though to help us determine what additional resource might be needed to achieve a higher rate if we were trying to find a quantum or a level of achievement?
Again, I'd come back to the exam question about the level of accessibility. So when we look at the buildings, it's very much very defined accessibility issues. When we look at the transport audit, there are some accessibility issues that are easier to define than others. When we look into parks, and we're talking about accessibility, we can talk about physical accessibility, people with sight impairment, people with neurodivergence. It becomes quite wide. So I think we'd have to be really clear here what we were focusing on. If we were primarily focusing on physical accessibility, then that would be a different answer we would be bringing back to you. So I think we've got to be really clear what we're looking to achieve here.
So it's a bit more nuanced than just get the stats.
It is.
Yeah. Understood. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you all. Just building a little bit on some of those questions there. Kathy, just in the parks and reserve space, is there any kind of planning guides or kind of standards out there around what good looks like in terms of accessibility, or are we kind of left to identify that on our own?
There is good guidance that's available for outdoor spaces. That's come out recently. In terms of when we're looking at our parks, there's sort of guidance around accessibility for playgrounds, but what we've tended to in the city to date is focus on being able to get people across parks, so physical access across the park into the playgrounds. So there are guidelines, but each playground design is really about the things you should consider, what the guidelines are, rather than you should have this, and this. So it does make it a little bit problematic. And as you understand, we're also trying to push the other way and say if we develop gross motor skills in children, we need to have more natural play and more challenging play, and then that goes in the opposite end to having more accessible play. So it is quite difficult.
Great, thank you for that. Appreciate that context. And just on the transport space, sounds like we're right on the cusp of getting an information infusion there. What's the kind of expectation between receiving that information, how much time it might take to kind of digest, process, and then kind of have a work program that starts to be seen out in the streets?
Yes, so we've received the data from the audit. We are sort of imminently expecting the reporting that talks about that data. Right now, we'll be looking at the accessibility outcomes of next year's program. As I mentioned, we'll be building it in, and there'll be achievement on the actions already being built into that program. The reflection on the program versus the actual reporting don't necessarily have a set timeline on it. It would probably be the result of how we decide to report them and measure that. Having not seen that report, it's hard for me to comment on how we might be measuring against the actions in that report.
Cool, no, that's great, thanks. There's some comment in the report around the next accessibility report, and just wondered, is this report already on a set tempo? Is it a annual thing that we get back, or what's the tempo that we're actually working on for reporting back on these areas?
So the cadence has been annual, but that's, we're in the committee's hands.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Just a couple more questions, if that's okay. Just in terms of page 97, programme 1884, the Local Reserve Accessibility and Safety Improvements, that programme, what's the value of that programme per year?
30,000.
Okay. And would you say that that's a dedicated fund towards this sort of work, or is that covering other things as well?
No, that is dedicated towards this work, understanding that accessibility and safety quite often go together. So, for example, we may put in lighting, which improves the safety, but then that also will improve the accessibility. So,
okay. And in terms of the transport, the next section of more the transport-focused assessment that you're talking about, the additional 500,000 for footpath renewals, how much of that funding could address some of what's been highlighted through that audit?
I would say that every metre of footpath that we renew would contribute towards increasing our accessibility. So, yeah, there's a really direct overlap with all of that funding.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, colleagues and the officers, for the answers. I've become increasingly confused listening to the answers to this report. So my understanding from the table in 3.6 on page 95 is that we've identified 1,847 things to do. We've told the community these are the 1,847 things we are going to do over time, and then we report back against our progress on doing all of them. However, in answers to questions, we've heard comments like, well, it depends what you want to prioritise. Is it people with limited vision? Is it people with neurodivergency? It depends on, are we making things more complex or less? Is this a list of things we intend to do, or is this not a list of things we intend to do?
So just for clarity, section 3 and the table only relate to the property program. It doesn't relate to parks and transport, and some of our answers have been in relation to those other areas.
Okay. So of the property side of the portfolio, are these things that we intend to do, or are these things that maybe one day we might think about doing some of them?
Councillor, they are things that we intend to do.
Okay.
As I've mentioned earlier, it's a matter of what we can do with what resources we have. For example, the public toilet renewal program will address things like handrails, accessible, increasing accessible toilets through the network, collar contrasting in those amenities for sight impaired people. So the priority list obviously starts with legislative compliance, safety, and then they become less of a priority depending on those sort of key characteristics. But yes, this is an active list that the team work on as productively as we can.
Okay. So of the 837 that are remaining that are either completed, aside from those being completed in progress, the Chair did ask, what is the timeline for getting them done? I appreciate you can't give it to me to the day, but is this to manage expectation in the community, is this something we intend to do in the next 3 years, 10 years, 15 years? What sort of period in your mind as officers are you working toward to get this done?
I don't think it'll be within 3 years. I think 5 is probably a good guide, but what I think we would need to do is go away, look at the remaining items on that list, look at our forward work program and intended projects through the next 5-year horizon. For example, the library, we wouldn't go in there and fix the individual identified accessibility issues separately from doing that renewal work to Central Library. If that's the decision that's made, they will be picked up through that project. And there could be quite a large number, for example, in that single project itself. But I don't think it would take us too long to go away and map the outstanding tasks on the accessibility program with what we know we've got coming up, either as recurrent programs and then one-off projects, and we could marry those up and give you a bit of a roadmap through that if that's helpful.
That would be greatly appreciated, Madam Chair.
Thank you. That's the end of the questions, so thank you very much for your report. So the recommendation is that The committee received the memorandum entitled Council Infrastructure Accessibility Initiative presented to the Community Resilience and Sustainability Committee on the 10th of June 2026. I'm happy to move it and look for a seconder, Councillor Naylor. In terms of a comment, it is pleasing to see that the work is being done. Perhaps what's less pleasing is to see that the pace is quite slow. And I acknowledge that that's because we, as a council, haven't put additional funding in, and so officers are doing the best they can with the funds available as renewals and repairs are made to make sure that those particular pieces of council infrastructure are accessible. So I do think that going forward, we'll need to give some thought in the long-term plan on whether or not we have a specific fund available that staff could draw on in a similar way, I think, to the low carbon fund, although I appreciate it's not exactly parallel, to be able to access funding for speeding up the rate of improvement, because though the Disability Reference Group did acknowledge that improvements have been made, I think their comments were fair when they said the progress had been slower than anticipated. And it's clear that the main constraint is funding. So I do think that we need to give some consideration in the long-term plan to prioritising some funding for this. If this is genuinely a priority for us, we should be prepared to fund it. Right, I will head over to the Mayor for a comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I just acknowledge the officers in the report? Look, colleagues, this stuff's very expensive. It's really expensive. But it is vital for the disability sector and really a reason why they do live here in Palmerston North. And we heard one of their key goals from the DRG group was this work. And like the Chair, they've acknowledged it and they're grateful, but they do want to see a bit more speed in I suppose, in the actions of that plan. The disability sector, and as Kathy acknowledged, there's several different strands to that too. It's just not physical. Sometimes it's sight, it's neurological. There's a whole lot of different strands to it. So it is quite wide and varied, but we are a city that is flat, is relatively easy to get around, and a lot of our disabled community live here because of choice. So we have a responsibility to do something too. And I'll come back to my first words. Some don't. We're not going fast enough for some, and I'm in that space as well. But I come back to my first comment. It's because it's so expensive to do this work. So how do we get through that in a balanced and reasonable way? And I quite liked the Chair's comments around an accessibility fund, which would then be able to enable officers to quicken some of those projects. And I do think that's probably a good starting point for a debate at the long-term plan. It's worked in the carbon area and it's been very successful. So I know that it's quite different, as the officers explained, but I think it will give some reassurance to that sector that we are acknowledging the issues and we're trying to do something about it. But it is challenging, so it's not an easy fix. But again, just acknowledging that there is some work happening, that the staff have been really transparent that it does take a long time and it is expensive, and there are so many different strands to this. But if we can sort out the areas like the central city, that makes it so much more enjoyable for that sector to be able to come in to the city, feel like that they can get around, and you know they feel a part of us, and they feel valued. So let's see where it goes in the LTP, but we've made a start. So thank you to the officers.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, and thanks to the officers for this report. And reading through the report, it's really clear that we are making some significant progress. And when I think of where we were at before this piece of work was even started, I'm really pleased that we've identified what the need is across the city and that that is being progressed. To think that there's over 300 actions that are either completed or in progress is significant when you look at the detail involved in what even one action entails. And so from that perspective, I'm pleased. I acknowledge the frustration of the Disability Reference Group at perhaps the lack of pace, and acknowledge the importance of them seeing further progress and how that impacts on them. In terms of the history of this work, there's been quite perhaps a rocky process for this to get underway, because the two key pieces of work, the buildings was identified initially by staff as being progressed prior to the transport component, whilst actually the transport component is absolutely important. And what I have heard from the group is the importance particularly of things like footpath renewals, and I'm really pleased that we have supported an additional 500,000 renewals in this coming year's budget towards that, because from my perspective that is absolutely dedicated funding, and the primary reason that I supported that additional funding was based on the feedback from the disability community. So I think it's important that we look at things and as more broadly than just looking at the numbers of actions in this particular report. We need to understand the depth and extent of work involved in each action to really recognise what progress we have made, but totally acknowledge the desire from the community to continue that progress and perhaps a faster rate. And I do support the idea that the Chair has put across about having some further dedicated funding considered as part of the LTP, and I'd be happy to support that.
Right, I'll just make a note of that. The Deputy Mayor.
Kia ora, Madam Chair. I was waiting for you to say a little bit more there, but I'd like to thank the staff for bringing this here. I also found that listening to Sarah and Rose this morning, understandably talking about their needs for that community that require, and it's diverse. I really appreciated that, and I thought it was good to have them to provide that context prior to us discussing this at large. I think making accessibility mainstreamed within our planning would be an ideal as opposed to an optional add-on. I also think that, you know, having the diverse groups with special needs meeting to discuss this and sharing it is really good, and I think there's some wonderful things, and I just was hoping that the central government would give us a dollop of money so that we and every other community around the country could put that in place. I hear the Mayor beside me saying that's not going to happen, but I really do think that we need to progress, and I do see the progress made, and I thank the staff for doing that. I see this as a real commitment that we must make to members of our community to support them. Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. That's the end of the comments. I don't think I need a right of reply. So let's just go straight to the vote. And that is carried, 14 votes for and none against. That brings us on to the item number 11, the research report, District Plan and Public Health. I invite Joe Ross, Senior Planner, and Jono Ferguson-Pye, Manager City Planning, to the table, please.
Kia ora koutou. Through the chair, before we start, I'd just like to introduce Joanna Ross. Joanna's started with us in February as a senior planner. We're very fortunate to have Jo working in the team. Jo brings well over 30 years worth of planning experience into the team, so I'm very fortunate to have her. So I thought I'd just make that introduction and hand it over to Jo.
Kia ora koutou, hello everybody. Thanks Jono for the introduction. And as Jono mentioned, I'm a senior planner in the City Planning Group. And I'm here today as I wrote the report titled The District Plan and Public Health. It was in response to Council's notice of motion from 17th of December 2025. And I'd just like to make a few comments before answering any questions. The notice of motion asked that Council assess the Palmerston North City District Plan for gaps in relation to public health, including but not limited to to consideration of safe separation between petrol stations and childcare, school, health and residential land uses. In order to respond to this task, I began by exploring the connections between planning and public health. This highlighted that the topic is complex and encompasses many issues that planning leads or plays a role in. One of the key messages was that the natural and built environments are determinants of health in the community. Rapidly growing populations and increasing urbanisation is changing the form and function of the built environment. Managing this complexity falls within the remit of planning, and research indicates that land use planning policies can influence health outcomes. The relationship between planning and public health is a long one, with many positioning its origins as a response to the ill effects of the Industrial Revolution. One media commentator went so far as to say that the alliance between planning and public health has made, quote, a far greater contribution to improving health and increasing life expectancy over the following century than medicine, end quote. Although internationally there has been growing disconnect between planning and public health, the importance of this relationship gained prominence during and following the recent global pandemic, and much of what I read called for a multidisciplinary, collaborative response to achieve healthier cities. In the New Zealand context, there has been planning legislation since 1926 that has required consideration of health and well-being. The planning bill is less clear on this, but one of the goals listed in that bill is to create well-functioning urban and rural areas. In order to assess the district plan for gaps in relation to public health, I identified 4 key themes from my reading on the topic: healthy environments, active transport, health equity, and healthy communities. These are all quite high level and could be further refined, but for the purposes of this report were used as criteria to see if and how the plan addressed them. What I found was that while there weren't many direct references to public health in the district plan, it did include many provisions intended for public health outcomes. These included, in relation to environmental factors, the provisions for green spaces. In relation to equity, the plan contains provisions for the protection of access to daylight and sunlight. In relation to active transport, the plan included references to mixed-use environments and walkability. And in relation to healthy communities, there were many references to amenity, livability, and communities generally. There were some high-level gaps identified, for example, how to plan for the effect of increased urban heat as a result of climate change, and how to plan for access to affordable housing and transport options. The notice of motion specifically asked that the assessment consider safe separation distances between petrol stations, which I referred to in the report as hazardous facilities, and childcare, school, health and residential land uses, which I refer to in the report as sensitive activities. In this regard, I note that the function of district councils to control land use, to prevent or mitigate adverse effects of the storage, use, disposal or transportation of hazardous substances was removed in 2017. The MFE indicated the intent of this change was to remove the perception that councils must always place controls on hazardous substances under the RMA, and to ensure councils only place additional controls on hazardous substances if they're necessary to control effects under the RMA that are not covered by the Hazardous Substances and New Organisms Act or the Health and Safety in Work Acts. However, councils still have a broad function of achieving integrated management under the RMA and could potentially address these effects relating to, or some effects relating to hazardous facilities and sensitive activities under that function. An assessment of the district plan's provisions against for hazardous substances against hazardous facilities against similar chapters in other district plans was undertaken. No overall assessment was made as to whether there's a gap in the operative district plan in relation to separation distances and sensitive activities, as this would require significant technical expertise. However, it showed that the Palmerston North District Plan, while written before the 2017 amendments to the RMA, was not too dissimilar to other district plans in New Zealand. Finally, I note that this report is the product of a desktop-only study with a primary focus on district plan provisions. It is intended as a contribution to this ongoing conversation. Although several potential gaps relating to public health were identified, the government's Plan Stop Directive excludes any changes being made to the district plan unless the Minister granted an exemption to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jo. We'll open up for any questions now from elected members. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Jo and Jono. I appreciate the report coming through. Just do have a couple questions. First, around kind of the methodological approach. You indicated that there in the report you said there was no engagement with either internal or external stakeholders, and I'd just be interested to know why that approach was taken.
So the brief that I was given was to do a literature review and assessment of the district plan, and so the methodology that I followed was to look at or do reading around those two things, public health and planning, how they intersected, what the relationship was. From that, identified those four broad themes and used those to do a document analysis looking at the relevant chapters of the district plan.
Cool, thank you. The report describes there being a fact sheet, but I couldn't quite tell if that was the appendices or if that was something else.
So that was I think that's the MFE fact sheet that you're referring to. So that was on those 2017 Resource Legislation Amendment Act. Yeah. Thanks.
Just moving on to findings of the report, and specifically around the question of petrol stations and safe setback distances. So this guidance from Western Australia, Department of Health and EPA, if I've read it right, does set out that they have a position around petrol station buffers being either 50 or 100 meters, kind of depending on how big the petrol station is.
That is my understanding. That's directly, what I've included in that report is direct from those other reports.
Great, thanks. And that was based on 9 studies that they had reviewed?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
That was based on 9 studies that they had reviewed around the actual underlying risk?
I would have to revisit that to confirm, but yeah, that was the distances that they specified were what was in the report.
Great, thank you. In terms of next steps, just finally, Madam Chair, the potential steps in 5.1 of your report. Just from your, I guess, research so far, could we focus your 2B and 2C to look more specifically at the chronic exposure issues rather than kind of that broader issues, hazardous substances? There's, quite a lot in the whole hazardous substance space, but kind of coming into a narrower focus on chronic exposure?
I think that would be a decision that the committee could make it slightly outside the scope in terms of the report assessing the district plan.
Sorry, Councillor, I might just add to that. Certainly if elected members were of a mind to direct us to do that, we could. Obviously, we'd have to balance that with an incredibly high BAU work program at the moment, to see whether we could do that with existing resources or whether we'd have to request further resources to do that.
Thanks, John. Just to follow up on that, so to be clear, the question was around the kind of further advocacy steps rather than a further research step.
Okay, noted. Thank you.
Cool, thanks. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's my questions, just to indicate, do you have additional recommendation along those lines?
Thank you. Did you want to speak to that now, or do you want to wait until it comes up? Oh, right, okay. Oh, Councillor Bowen's popped into the queue. Okay, Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to pop in, Joe, thank you for the report and the wider thinking on this. And you'll remember when this originally came to Council through Councillor Barrett's notice, we were talking about how this wasn't a Palmerston North problem on its own. And I noted one of your optional recommendations was about sharing the report with the Minister or with RMA interested people. I wondered if there was potential to share that more broadly with other territorial authorities or with LGNZ, and if that's something we could accommodate, if that's an interest.
We could definitely undertake that as an action if that was what was wanted.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the end of questions. Thank you very much, Joe and Jono. I'm happy to move recommendations 1 and 2, that the committee receive the memorandum entitled Research Report, District Plan and Public Health, presented to the Community Resilience and Sustainability Committee on 10th of June, and that the committee note that the Plan Stop Directive from the government means it is not possible to amend or update the district plan at present without approval. And look for a seconder, Councillor Barrett. I'll just speak to those two to start with, and then Councillor Barrett, if you want to speak to your additional recommendations. So I think that this has been a useful report, a useful follow-up to some concerns that elected members had. It is interesting that it's brought up some things that perhaps we didn't know about. So we already were thinking about petrol stations, but it's brought up gaps around urban heat increasing, which we hadn't really given any consideration to much, and also about equitable access to transport and housing. So I think it has given us a bit more food for thought than perhaps we were expecting, which is good, and interesting to see what we might be able to achieve through advocacy, although I'm not holding my breath on that. Over to you, Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I do have a few comments here, so appreciate colleagues bearing with. The additional recommendations, which are just coming to screen now, is a bit of words to work through, but it is largely lifted from 5.1 in the report, with a specific focusing down on the chronic exposure risks, which is the key risk around the original notice of motion. So in general, though, thanks very much to staff for the work put into this report, and to Councillor Arnott as well in terms of supporting the start of this with the notice of motion and continuing this and seconding these additional recommendations. I'd like to start by just reminding us of two basic facts. First is there is an incredibly well-known link between petrol in general and cancer risk. That was discovered in the 20s. It's not the 2020s, it's the 1920s. We've known this for a very, very long time. The second thing we know is that the poison is in the dose. And in the case of young kids and modern petrol stations, a gap of 50 to 100 meters is perfectly sufficient to provide the protection by that just dilution through the air. Less than that, and the studies show that the risk of childhood leukemia goes up somewhere between 2 and 4-fold. So despite the fact that we know these two things, it is still amazing to me that in New Zealand we have a planning framework from the beehive right through the district plans that allow us today to have side by side across a boundary a petrol station and a daycare in our city in Church Street. And it seems to be that it's not just Church Street that's at risk. It looks like anywhere around the country, pretty much, that would still be quite perfectly legal. When you go to Church Street now, of course, the new petrol station's up and running. It's absolutely humming. And if you spend some time there, you can get a bit of a whiff of the fumes there. It's perfectly natural in a petrol station that you smell a bit of petrol. And then when you look across the boundary, you can actually see into the back of the childcare center. And they have this shade sail there. And why do they have a shade sail? To protect from cancer. It's really straightforward. Sunshine, UV, cancer protection. But yet at the same time, that childcare center faces from across the boundary line a cancer risk from petrol fumes. So that's just the scene in the background for me, and the reason that this continues to motivate me in terms of what we do as a city. In terms of the report, really great context. I thought that quote from the World Health Organization, most important asset of any city is the health of its people. Certainly some people might contest, exactly what the most important asset is, but I think it's very clear that public health and people's health is incredibly important. I think it's really helpful that it does confirm the core issue, and I think that Western Australian research was really helpful. The 9 studies underneath it, and the clarity that across New Zealand it seems that we don't really have any response yet in this space. My view, and I'd hope that you share that, is that it would be worth New Zealand at least investigating and considering whether we do have a response to that. And the question is simply, who does that investigating? I think the clue's in the Australian research. It's not done city by city, it's at a state level there, and it should be at a central government level here. So that's the purpose of these additional recommendations. I actually think the easiest way to get the minister's attention would be to go to recommendation 2 and amend it that we want to stop the prohibition on district plan changes, but I'm not sure that that's actually the best way to engage the minister on this subject. I think the best way to engage the minister on this subject is actually to take a continued advocacy approach, which is outlined here in 3 and in 4. So simply asking for your support that we can take the good work that our officers have done forward and make use of it through advocacy channels. Councillor Bowen, I hear your comment around sharing with other local government authorities. I would certainly read this as within scope of what is intended here, but if you want to see further language in there, very open to that as well. Yeah, and again, this is a bit more focused than what was in the report, because I think the whole of hazardous substances leads you down a very broad track, whereas the chronic exposure issue is identified in the HAZNO legislation and is clearly the core issue here. So please do support this and see what we can do on behalf of our city within New Zealand to hopefully see a future with reduced risk of childhood cancers. Thanks.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the mover for the narrowing of this. I think that's actually really useful. I think it speaks to the presenting issue back at the start of this debate, and also recognise Councillor Arnott's work in this space. Yes, I would probably make significant eye contact across the chamber, he's not listening, to seek a friendly amendment to, sorry, you see, just talking to you, through you, Madam Chair, to seek a friendly amendment to specifically expand the scope of number 3, probably, but either to also include TA colleagues in that, because I don't think the reading of that would naturally include it. Maybe we could add "and other interested parties," and that would give officers enough scope to share more widely, because I do continue to think, as I did when this first came up, that this isn't a Palmerston North issue. I'm grateful to colleagues for their willingness to think widely about the issues that face us as a community, but we are not alone in facing those issues. And I would hate to see duplication of the same work. I'm very confident in the quality of the work our staff do. I think our planning team particularly take a leadership role in our local TA community. And I think we'll be very proud to share this piece of work, because it's very strong and has answered the question probably in a broader way than we were anticipating when we asked the question. But it will be certainly worthwhile sharing across our TA colleagues, and I'd like to see that reflected in the recommendation if we can. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So, sorry, are you suggesting an amendment at the moment? Sorry, two people are talking to me at once. Just let me put Councillor Bowen on again. Yep.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I'm happy to move it as amendment, but I think the mover would be happy to include in the general terms and other interested parties.
Okay, just excuse me a minute. That's fine, thank you. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This notice of motion came about because a petrol station was approved right next to a daycare centre. Where the people agreed...
Sorry, Councillor, I'm just going to interrupt you there. And what I don't really want here is a relitigation of a council consent. Your comments need to focus on the report in hand, okay?
They do.
Yeah, okay.
Are we adequately considering public health when potentially polluting activities are located next to places where babies and children learn, play and spend much of their day? I found this report frustrating at times because it spends a lot of time explaining who is responsible and what council can't do. I was hoping for a clearer answer to whether there is a gap in the current framework. My concern hasn't really been about a petrol station catching fire or a tank exploding, heaven forbid. It's about the potential effects of long-term exposure when the facility is operating exactly as intended year after year, decade after decade. To me, if that is a legitimate public health concern, then it shouldn't be left to individual councils to deal with one consent application at a time. There should be a consistent national approach, and the same rules should apply across the country because it is a national problem. While I don't think this report fully answers the question we asked, it has at least put the issue on the table and highlighted that there is a wider discussion to be had about public health and planning around this country. Thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have found this report incredibly enlightening and incredibly concerning both at the same time. I really appreciate the trigger that instigated this report being the concern around hazardous substances and sensitive activities. However, what this report has really highlighted, particularly on page 112 of our in the executive summary of our agenda, is that the resource management reform suggests that for the first time in 100 years there will be no reference to health and wellbeing in either the purpose of the Act intended to replace the RMA or the purpose of land use plans. And that really concerns me because it raises the concern that who is going to be responsible for the health and wellbeing of our community. When you understand the social determinants of health and the very small role that healthcare plays in the health and wellbeing of our community, it's very quick to it's very easy to realise that the importance of the other influences of the social determinants of health and the very key role that council plays in that currently, if that is to be taken away, it's a huge concern to me. So in the next steps on our, in the report, under 2A, 5.12A, that one of the considerations in this report has been that the council could advocate to minister responsible for RMA reform and A, seek that planning for health and wellbeing remains a function of the local government when finalising the planning bill and natural environment bill. So what I would like to do is move an amendment to recommendation 4 to add C, a further clause that Councillor Barrett is happy to second, that is actually the wording of 5.12A, which is, so what it would read is, that the council advocate to the minister responsible for RMA reform and government officials working on resource management reform to seek that planning for health and wellbeing remains a function of local government when finalising the planning bill and natural environment bill. Councillor Barrett is happy to second that. So thanks to the work of those doing the report, and definitely it's frustrating at this point that it can't be specifically addressed, But I think we should do what we can do at this point, and I will support the recommendations outlined, but also would seek to add that further recommendation or further clause to recommendation 4.
Okay, since that's going up as an amendment, I'm now seeking speakers to the amendment. So if you're not wanting to speak to the amendment, perhaps take yourself out of the queue. Is it?
I say
Go
so.
ahead,
so I don't have
Councillor
the-
Wood, with your sort of point of order.
I don't have the exact standing order on me, but given Councillor Barrett's the mover of the motion, I believe in our standing order he's not allowed to second an amendment to his own motion. And so I wonder perhaps for the sake of moving the debate along, if he's willing to second it, perhaps he just incorporates it into his original motion and we don't have to deal with an amendment.
Okay, I believe you are correct. In order to do that, we'd have to have Councillor Arnott as the seconder to agree. Yeah, he's agreeable. So that's what we'll do then. We'll change it to moved by Councillor Barrett, seconded by Councillor Arnott. Is it still an amendment? No. Okay, it now becomes part of the substantive, so I'll open up for comments on any aspect of the recommendations that are before us, if you have got further comments. Councillor Arnott, are you comfortable with Councillor Bowen's suggestion of, can we just see recommendation 3? That the research report is shared with the Minister responsible for RMA reform, government officials working on resource management reform and other territorial authorities? Oh, and other interested parties, I think we said. Okay, yep, you happy with that? Yep, okay. Right, I think we've got there. Any further comments? Councillor.
Councillor Wood has drawn to my attention that the Minister for RMA Reform might not be an interested party, but I think that's a joke, so we'll leave it.
We'll try and avoid the political commentary, please, Councillor. Councillor Barrett, is this a right of reply? Okay, are there any further comments? I'll just have a right of reply on my 1 and 2 that I proposed. Just to say that I think it's important to be aware here that we are not responsible for monitoring discharge to air. That is a regional council responsibility. And therefore, whilst we have a concern about our community, it's not actually our role to monitor that particular aspect. And in addition to that, I would caution councillors that we don't want to be relitigating consent decisions that this council has made. The notice of motion was definitely a forward-looking, looking at gaps in the district plan, and so let's try and keep the comments on that. Councillor Barrett, right of reply.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to respond briefly, thank you, Councillor Bowen, for your various interventions, including the humorous ones. And thank you to Councillor Naylor as well. I think, there was a draft of these additional recommendations as recently as yesterday that did include what is now 4C. And my kind of discussions with Councillor Arnott were around taking a more focused approach and seeing if anything's built out from that. There's a couple pieces that have built out, and I think it's quite appropriate and reasonable, provided we don't lose sight of 4A and 4B, because that's the originating and driving impulse on this, is to get that particular issue looked at. But yes, there's absolutely a range of broader issues, as the chair has alluded to, that the broader report shows that may be worth picking up in future, and certainly the point of needing some responsibility around health and public health within planning frameworks going forward is a very worthy cause indeed. So thanks for raising that, Councillor Naylor, and hopefully everyone is comfortable to support these, and we can wish our team well in taking this advocacy forward.
Is everybody happy if we take all 4 together, or does anybody want anything separated? Okay, all together then. And that is carried, 12 votes for and none against. And that takes us on to the committee works. So I'll just hand over to the General Manager in case there are any comments on that.
Just the one change, with approval from the Chair, we're going to move the annual monitoring report for the food security policy from the August meeting to the September meeting.
And could you just elaborate on why that is for those who might be interested in understanding why it's been delayed?
Apologies. It's just a timing. We just haven't quite got it to the state that it needs to be to get to you in time.
Are there any questions for the GM on the work schedule? I'll take that as a no. So I will move that we receive the work schedule dated June 2026 and look for a seconder. Councillor Barrett. Any comment? No, then we will vote. Thank you. And that is carried. 12 votes for and none against. So that brings us to the end of the meeting, and I will just close with the karakia. Kia puta ki te whaio ki te ao marama whakamoia ki a tino. Homie huie taikie. Thank you very much. You've done very well, and we're out before lunchtime. I'm sure the Mayor will be delighted.